Hi everyone, welcome to today's IUG webinar, Enterprise 911 Legislation and the Requirements for Compliance, presented by Bill Svien from Vita Safety Partners. Before we begin, I have 3 quick housekeeping items to go over. First, today's webinar will be recorded and available for your on-demand viewing by the end of the day. Second, a Q&A session will follow today's presentation. All your questions will need to be entered into that question window near the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen. Third, there will be a short evaluation that pops up as you are exiting the webinar. Please take a minute to let us know what you thought of today's session and what you might like to see going forward. All right, let's get started. I will turn it over to you, Bill.
Great. Thank you, Paige. And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. Today, we're looking at Enterprise 911 legislation and the requirements for compliance. First off, I need to tell you that my friend and co-conspirator, Brian Anderson, will not be joining us today. He received an unfortunate news that Avaya made personnel changes that affected him a little over a week ago. But I'm sure he'll find a great job and land in a great company. He's just a fine individual. I've been in this little niche, but important niche in the telecommunications since January of 2000. My company, 911 ETC, grew up in the industry, and we contributed to many advancements in Enterprise 911. After 16 years of growth, our client list reflected the who's who of Fortune 100 and 1,000 organizations. We served both private and public entities of all sizes. ETC successfully merged with Intrado in December of 2016. After various short-term assignments, we started Vita Safety, and that brings us today. We've separated the legislation compliance aspects into bite-sized morsels to consider before, during, and after your Enterprise 911 solution is in place. First, we'll look directly at the rules and regulations, then the technology side. Then we'll jump into the people aspect of Enterprise 911. And finally, we'll look at the gotchas that can stall out an implementation, increase risks to the organization. So let's look at Kari's law, BAUMS Act, Alyssa's law, and the penalties for non-compliance. First off, 19 states have some form of Enterprise 911 regulation on their books. Most organizations look past those since the FCC rules encompass the entire United States. What is absolutely required? Well, you can see in the slide, the rules state that MLTS manufacturers, installers, managers, operators are responsible. These are key terms of responsibility for most likely the majority of those on the call today and the organizations utilizing the MLTS or voice core. So that would be all of us. So the dates that you see on the slide, after these dates, your organization is required to comply with these rules and regulations or face the penalties, not to mention the exposure of legal ramifications for negligence and or liability you or your organization faces for not complying. Kari's family was awarded $41 million. There is talk of a similar case in St. Louis, which is winding its way through the court system as we speak. These civil lawsuits are setting up precedents for case law for future litigation. Penalties for non-compliance can be $10,000 per occurrence and $5,000 per device per day. So that could be very substantial. Alyssa's law mandates mobile and silent panic button alerting systems in public schools, silently alerting first responders of an emergency within the school. The same thing is here too as well. The laws are being passed, and it will be up to the managers, that is the users of the technology, to implement and care for the application which provide its end users this technology. Applying the legislation to the available technology can be confusing and costly. When looking at technology, consider the mantra of Enterprise 911. That is, find, route, and notify. When we go through these technology requirements, we're talking about each and every voice core imaginable and the endpoint devices connected to them. So that's on-prem PBX, anything connected to the PBX, any specialized software integrated to the PBX, any cloud solution, UCaaS, CCaaS, collaboration platforms. So if we really zero in on find, we look at if a first responder can find and quickly get to the person in distress, we've shaved out valuable time which could save their life. If humans can make a call on a voice device, it's now covered under legislation. So dialing, voice command, click, or text to 911, then that device needs to be allowed access to 911, be properly located, and given a precise dispatchable location. Any voice device at any location at any time. The device needs to be allowed access to 911. The voice core application must find, locate, and be assigned a precise dispatchable location. This can be achieved with on-campus IP discovery or users self-reporting their location when off-campus or working from home. While keeping in mind that zones are physical parameters, relying on individual characteristics may not always make sense. Size might be valid, however, larger open spaces may be suitable for larger zones due to the visibility of the area. Likewise, small complex spaces with many hallways may require more defined zone granularity, directional signs, and the like. To an outside person, every hallway looks the same. When defining zones, consider the audience. Discuss the plan with internal and public safety officials to see what they want to consume and what is realistic and valid for dispatchable location identifiers. Keep in mind that many 911 calls are becoming cellular originated. On-campus alerting when 911 calls are placed is now available via geofencing. New next-gen 911 record formats allow extensive data, links to external data, and multiple multimedia data that can be descriptive and very detailed without incurring individual record costs. In addition, next-gen 911 or over-the-top delivery of situational data allows for pinpoint mapped dispatchable location. Could this do away with the need for constrictive zones? Following the mantra of find, route, and notify, we now look at routing. At my former company, we had a very large cell phone manufacturer that was often confused as an orchard selling fruit. In this case, it relied on 2 data centers located in 2 different areas of the US to handle all of their worldwide traffic. All voice calls, including emergency calls, went in and out of those data centers. So a caller in distress dialing 911 from Boston would traverse their private network and pop out to the PSTN from one of those data centers. Our VSP, or voice service positioning service, would accept the call, locate the caller, push that caller into the emergency services network and into the localized PSAP. The same was true of a larger financial organization known for its signature Stagecoach. Not all locations were SIP connected. Some utilized redundant data centers for all calls. Other branches were still on PRI. In this case, we supplied an in-network media gateway, which converted the original digital call to a SIP call, which we provided a similar redirection to the proper localized PSAP. As next generation rolls out to local communities, the translation from traditional emergency services network to an ESINet, or an emergency services IP network, is still served by the same VSP. What's taking place in the meantime, prior to the continuous next-gen 911, service providers such as Rapid SOS, working in conjunction with VSP providers, can provide PSAPs with additional situational data in the form of maps, video, access control, and environmental data. One of Avaya's SPP partners is embracing this concept. One of the buggers of all this granular location and routing data is what happens when the 911 caller hangs up or is disconnected. PSAPs are required to call the individual back. The VSP and the software or the app privy to the call must be able to remember where the call came from and redirect the caller or the designated answer position when the PSAP calls back. Remember, we're talking about all voice core configurations. Now, let's look at the notify component of the 911 mantra. The regulations indicate MLTS notifications must meet the following requirements. It must be initiated contemporaneously with the 911 call, provided that it is technically feasible to do so. And it must not delay the call to 911, and it must be sent to a location where someone is likely to see or hear it. As in find and route, notify, this feature is the feature native to the voice core. If not, we're talking about introducing a third-party application. An organization with one civic address location is pretty straightforward. Those recipients of the call alert can respond to the emergency event and could easily be the caller or the callback position as well. But what if the organization with multiple locations, multiple businesses or service units, different EAPs or emergency action processes, procedures, policies, all served by the same voice core? Whenever we have a hybrid configuration introducing various applications, this is most assuredly requires a third-party provider. Cloud providers like RingCentral, Avaya Cloud Office, have fairly robust features and tools to comply with FCC regulations, but in certain situations, they also may have to integrate a third-party application to achieve the desired results. Emergency on-site notification provides compliant alerting for organizations of all shapes and sizes while adhering to the organization's emergency action plan. Let's quickly look at Avaya's answer to the requirement for third-party solution providers. Avaya has certified 2 third-party emergency solution providers as select products within Avaya's DevConnect program. Those 2 companies are 911 Inform and 911 Secure. Each company has innovated to integrate to almost any conceivable voice device. They've written APIs to connect to call center software and collaboration platforms, including Genesys, Five9, Teams, and others. Integration capabilities with other security emergency applications like access control, overhead paging, mass notification, climate control, shot detection, they seem to be embraced primarily by 911 Inform. But digital mapping with alerting noted on the maps are often suggested by 911 Inform as well. Both companies strongly suggest their ability to detect cellular calls to 911 based on the rapid SOS geofencing and its capability to report mapped locations and their emergency on-site notification applications. Emergency events encompass all situations, environments, and 911 Informed has built a platform which encompasses all aspects of the emergency response ecosystem. 911 informs that any life safety solution requires more than just award-winning products to be successful, and this is why they have developed the following services to ensure the best solution possible. You can see those here. 911 Secure has a similar mantra. Bandwidth is the second largest VoIP service positioning, which is the VSP upstream provider that many enterprise application providers utilize in their routing carrier as their routing carrier. Both 911 Informed and 911 Secure utilize bandwidth as their routing carrier. What's cool about bandwidth is that it can handle any hybrid combination of these networks and routing methodologies within the same enterprise organization. In addition, bandwidth can utilize a pseudo-ANI, which steers the call while retaining the identity of the endpoint and its dispatchable location information. This transport methodology is so smart that it can remember the transport stream to allow a PSAP operator the ability to call back that same device in the event of a hangup. No more is the requirement of a DID to a device relationship as a requirement. Currently, certain enterprise 911 application service providers utilize an over-the-top delivery methodology to allow PSAPs to pull additional data delivery. In combination with bandwidth and rapid SOS, we can create the market-leading solution that they have in place. When looking to invest in an enterprise 911 solution, you must invest in tech-forward solutions, which embraces the EZNet development and the PSAP next generation 911 technology. We look at the third consideration, and that's the human side. What roles do the stakeholders need to fulfill? Stakeholders before, during, and after selection, implementation, and ongoing care, and maintenance of the application. Each department of the organization will shape the design and usage of the enterprise 911 application. Do you need their buy-in before, during, and after each phase of the project? Enterprise organizations, policies, procedures, processes affect the design, usage, and implementation and testing of the application. Does your organization have an emergency action plan in place? You'll need to fold 911 calling into the policies and procedures of that plan. Don't forget to document instructional training and use of the application. Does your organization provide or allow personal smart devices that will require 911 application logins for voice use? Typically, users of these devices are required to self-report their dispatchable location. Are your work from home end users fully up to speed with self-reporting dispatchable location? Weave the enterprise 911 and the emergency ecosystem into the onboarding process for new hires and ongoing training as refreshers. It's critical for the people side of the enterprise 911 and the emergency response ecosystem to be fully and continually engaged and well-trained to ensure full compliance with the FCC regulations. Key stakeholders will be called to determine the best use cases of the 911 application centered around existing policy, or will be required to rewrite the policy to accommodate the new technology introduced into the organization. Who will be designated as the emergency on-site notification recipients? Will the first responders be met at the front gates or door? Will policy dictate escorting for the first responders? The EON alerting, the emergency on-site notification alerting during an emergency call is a major element in getting the first responders to the emergency location. The question is, what's acceptable behavior of the recipient of the 911 call or alert? Will policy and standard procedure allow an employee to escort the first responders to into a possible harm's way situation? Consider the important criteria in the emergency on-site notification process, such as alarm notification, confirmation and receipts, and well as escalation paths for alerts based on present time limits. This will help ensure proper people are notified. Enterprise organization policies, procedures, processes affect the design and usage and implementation and testing of the application. It's critical for your people side of the enterprise and the emergency response ecosystem to be fully and continually engaged and well-trained to ensure full compliance with each of the FCC regulations. Now we'll look at our fourth consideration, the dreaded gotchas. These gotchas can significantly delay the implementation of the Enterprise 911 project or blast holes in an existing platform's health and integrity. These gotchas are not only a time killer, they could increase risks to the organization that must be managed. Stakeholder involvement can make or break the successful design, implementation, and ongoing maintenance. Acquiring, assembling, and inputting dispatchable location data into the proper resources and repositories can be painfully slow. The longer it takes, the more chances for error as MACDs continue. Educating the organization on the necessity and the requirement for emergency on-site notification and callback recipients and assembling the data can be a slow process as well, especially with different business units or varied policies. Good examples of this are prisons, psych hospitals, or hazardous manufacturing facilities. Getting your hands on decent current floor plans is a feat itself. Digitizing those floor plans can be time consuming and will be required to keep, and then you'll be having to require to keep them current. Policy, procedure, and processes may need refreshing or outright rewriting. The gotchas on the next page are inevitable, but can be overcome or dodged. They're all valid. I'd like to highlight two, though, that will save your organization money. The first is the requirement for DID to device and/or zone relationship. With the advent of smart networks utilizing pseudo-ANIs, this requirement goes away. Thus, the ability for you to drastically reduce the number of DIDs specifically utilized for 911. The second is the PRI to SIP conversion. When this takes place, PSALI goes away, which is private switch automatic location identifier databases. Those go away and are replaced with VSP data. The use of pseudo-ANIs and the reduction of DIDs could save your organization significant dollars. It's now time for question and answers. Hopefully you've already typed your question in the chat box. If not, please do so. Paige will read those questions and I'll do my best to answer them. If we don't get to your question, Paige will see to it that we assemble the questions and answer them and get them to you. Paige, do we have any questions?
We do. My question box actually disappeared. Give me one moment. Yeah, my question box is actually gone.
Oh,
I don't know where it went.
okay. Any chance
Your
of
question box?
Yes. Nope.
You can pop it out with that square with the arrow.
Yep. Okay. Okay. One question. What is the law that mandates PSAP callbacks and under what conditions? It's not really highlighted in the law itself, but PSAPs in general are required, and this is just a function of PSAP procedures. If a caller is dropped or a caller is disconnected, the PSAP community must call the caller back. And because of that, and the requirement or the use of SIP technology and the use of pseudo-ANIs, PSAP calls need to be redirected back to the original caller or a answer point within the organization to handle that call. So it's not actually written into the law itself. It's just a procedure that the emergency services community and PSAPs use. Okay. Oh. What should an enterprise do if an application provider requires a third party to provide the functionality, but the application won't provide the interface with the functionality? Okay. The application won't provide, this is kind of an interesting question. What should the enterprise do if an application provider requires a third party to provide the functionality, but the application won't provide an interface with the functionality? Okay. I'm gathering that we're talking about an application possibly like Genesis call center application, where we're talking possibly about the connectivity of that application to the network, and yet the application is not able to do so. I would search for another third party provider that has the application or the APIs to connect that application to the emergency services network to do what's necessary in order to connect the application to the emergency services. We mentioned Ring Central when talking about technology. In what situation would Ring Central need a third party? There's a good chance that depending upon the configuration of the organization and the requirement of specialized emergency on-site notification parameters, Ring Central will be required, or Ring Central will actually willingly add a third-party provider to the equation to provide the on-site notification that's necessary in the situations that are not necessarily provided as a standard feature of Ring Central's 911 services and features that it typically provides in its general offer. The next question is an over-the-top application a true next-gen 911 application? Actually, no. Over-the-top is not next-generation 911. Next-generation 911 relies on an EZNet or an IP SIP network that is deployed within a community, and that next-generation 911 network is the network then that would supply the additional data that would be presented to the public safety answer point. The problem that exists is that oftentimes an enterprise is utilizing a network that is not next generation 911 ready. So service providers or application providers like 911 Inform, utilizing the connectivity from bandwidth and Rapid SOS, can duplicate the opportunity to provide additional data over the top so that the public safety answer point can actually pull that information or pull that data from Rapid SOS, as opposed to in an EZNet environment where the data is actually pushed along or presented with the call in the header of the call, and that particular language is used is called PITA-flow. Will the presentation's slides be shared? Yes, they will be shared. Next question. How do you maintain station location delivered to the PSAP? That depends on the application. That depends on the PBX itself. And oftentimes the two applications, the third-party application communicates with the voice core. The voice core then, during this, if it's a MACD situation, the voice core will then communicate with the third-party application, which then communicates with the VSP service provider, which then sets up the data so that when a call is placed, the information for dispatchable location is then presented to the PSAP in the proper way. When we look at users of smart devices or cell phones or laptop devices, oftentimes the user that self-reports their location if they're off campus, or sometimes even when they are on campus, depending upon the ability of either the PBX or the Wi-Fi that's connected to the PBX that would allow for access point identification and IP discovery. The next question, can you address best practices for identifying locations? You mentioned IP discovery, but any more specifics? Yeah. Dispatchable location is typically a geographic and building floor room location specific information. It depends on granularity of how granular the location needs to be based on, as I mentioned in the presentation, the configuration of the building. What's really interesting is now that we have the ability to, so zones. Zones can be endpoints of a PBX. They could be designed as zones based on relationships between a designated emergency location identification number, which is a DID, and an emergency response location, which is the general region or general area of a set of telephones that are in that general area. This is kind of the older way of doing things, but nevertheless, as a user moves from location to location or zone to zone, the discovery can take place during the registration of that particular device. With Wi-Fi, as the user moves from place to place and they are registering to the Wi-Fi access points, that creates a dispatchable location as well. What we're seeing more and more, though, is pinpoint map locations and the use of digital mapping, which 911 Inform is really the leader in the industry with regard to that. This would allow for pinpoint location based on a map, and that pinpoint would then be registered and provided to anyone that's receiving an emergency on-site notification alert. It's absolutely cool, and yet not everyone in the in the enterprise community is fully embracing it yet. But within a few years at most, I believe that most organizations will move toward that type of configuration for dispatchable location. And that concludes the questions, unless anyone else wants to type anything else in. Okay, well, the presentation is recorded. The slides will be available. And Paige, can you suggest anything else before we conclude the call?
Absolutely. Thank you both for taking over those questions. And thank you for taking the time to speak to us. For the audience, please be sure to check out this recording in our on-demand library at iug.org under the Events and Education tab. And also be sure to check out any upcoming webinars that are happening the rest of this fall and the rest of 2023. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. But from all of us at IUG, thank you and have a great rest of your day.